There are at least 3 ways to build most EDH decks.
Strong.
Fun. And mean. But sometimes one way makes the most sense. Let's look at the strong, fun, and mean way that I would build Phylath, World Sculptor. And the video starts right now. Special thanks to our Patreon supporters who power our channel. Check out our Patreon for monthly giveaways, exclusive content, and even a starring role in our fan fight series. Link in the description below. Hello and welcome to the day. Thank you for spending your time with us. Welcome back to another episode of Jake and Joel Are Magic. I am Joel. We're going to talk about Phylath, World Sculptor, and how I would build this commander in EDH. But first, if you like the video by the end of it, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and let me know down in the comments which commander you want me to build 3 ways, and maybe you'll see it in an upcoming video. Let's jump into this commander. So we've got Phylath, World Sculptor. I received this one in a request to build it 3 ways. It is a fairly narrow commander, though. Let's go through it real fast. 1 green, 1 red, 4 other for a legendary elemental creature, 5/5. When it enters the battlefield, create a 0/1 green plant creature token for each basic land you control. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, put 4 +1/+1 counters on target plant you control. This commander is pretty cool. It seems like it wants to do 2 different things, though. It seems like it wants to go wide, but it also wants to go tall. It's a very interesting take on it for me. I do like that you have both of these things built into the commander so that we can do some fun things with it. And that is why the strong, fun, and mean way that I want to build Phylath World Sculptor is a go wide, overrun strategy. Let's look at this. For a go-wide strategy, I can think of no card that embodies the entire thing we want to do better than Avenger of Zendikar. 2 green, 5 other for a 5/5 elemental. When it enters the battlefield, put a 0/1 green plant creature token onto the battlefield for each land you control. Now this is of note because Avenger of Zendikar also counts your non-basics, where Phylath only counts your basics. I think, though, that this won't have a ton of impact on our deck building because it is only 2 colors, so we can focus on putting more basics in our deck than you normally would. Put a lot of other non-basics in there. For that reason, I think Phylath's a great starting commander. I think this could be a really good one to, teach somebody how to play with, or take a strategy that is seemingly basic and really push it over the edge. And that's what we want to try and do. Avenger of Zendikar's second ability is Landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may put a +1/+1 counter on each plant creature you control. Now, why do I prefer go wide to go high? And it's because of targeted removal. They have to board wipe us, which would already be setting us back, but they have to board wipe us. We're forcing them to use that type of removal so that we really lose all strategy on our side. With a go high strategy, or Voltron strategies as they're sometimes called, you're putting all your eggs into one basket. You're really building up one creature, and Avenger of Zendikar lets us kind of grow our board evenly, while Phylath will let us grow individual ones as we have landfall. Now, obviously, with a landfall deck, I'm not going to show off these cards, but you should play things like Cultivate, Explosive Vegetation, Migratory Path. Look up those cards because they're going to help you put multiple lands onto the battlefield every single turn so that you're growing wide, and then eventually over time you're growing up and you're just overrunning. We'll get to Overrun here more in a second. Nissa, Voice of Zendikar, I love her in this deck because 2 green, 1 other for a 3 loyalty walker. That +1 ability puts another 0/1 plant onto the battlefield, so we've got a little plant tribal thing going, which I think is pretty cool. I'm always a sucker for tribal strategies, you know this. But that -2, right when she comes in, this is what I love. Put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. If we're just going absolutely wild with 0/1 plant tokens, that ability is going to be huge. Then, if you can get her to -7, you gain X and draw X, where X is the number of lands you control. That could be pretty sick in this deck as well. I also want to run Vivian, Monsters Advocate in this deck. 2 green, 3 other for a 3 loyalty walker. Passively, you get to look at the top card of your library at any time, and you can cast creature spells from the top of your library. That's pretty awesome just in and of itself. However, she lets you go even wider. Her +1 Okay, it doesn't tick her loyalty down at all, and that's why I really want to include stuff like this. Her +1 lets you put a 3/3 creature token onto the battlefield, and it also gets your choice of Vigilance, Reach, or Trample. This is a great way to go wide. Every turn, essentially, until they answer Vivian, you're going to be getting another creature token, and these effects are just going to kind of residually build more and more, and you're going to be going wider and wider and wider, and suddenly you're going to cast some big overrun spell, and your opponents aren't going to be able to do anything about it. Plus, Vivian also has the ability to -2 as soon as she's played that says whenever you cast your next creature spell this turn, search your library for a creature card with lesser CMC and put it right onto the battlefield. For a commander deck, a lot of your creatures are already going to be 4 CMC or higher, and so the ability to go get a toolbox creature if you need it is nothing to shake a stick at. You know, Reclamation Sage is just one example. Deranged Hermit, I love this in this deck. It's just more of this go wide, right? 2 green, 3 other for a 1/1 with Echo, so you got to pay the CMC twice. But when it comes into play, you put 4 squirrel tokens onto the battlefield, treat them as 1/1s, and all squirrels get +1/+1. So essentially you're putting 4 2/2s onto the battlefield, so you're getting 4 2/2s and a 1/1 for 5 mana. That's a pretty good return, especially for a go-wide strategy. I mean, if you've got Nissa on the battlefield and you're putting +1/+1 counters across your entire line, 5 attacking bodies is really good. And that's really what you want in this deck, is attacking bodies. Obviously, look at the first 2 cards that we looked at, the Commander and Avenger of Zendikar. 0/1 creatures. That's fine for this deck. We're going to plan for that with this deck. We want 0/1 bodies minimum. That's what we'll take. Arachnogenesis. I found this card while I was researching. That's been happening a lot recently, as I just wasn't aware of this card. Let me know in the comments if you had heard of Arachnogenesis. I'm sure a lot of you had. 1 green, 2 other instant to put X 1/2 green spider creature tokens with reach onto the battlefield, where X is the number of creatures attacking you. Prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn by non-spider creatures. So you're able to create a spider for each attacking creature, and they can block and survive, so that when it comes back around to your turn, you've got attacking bodies, which is really all we want in this deck. Azuri's Predation, 5 and 3 green for a sorcery for each creature your opponents control. All opponents. Put a 4/4 beast creature token onto the battlefield. Each of those beasts then fights a different one of those creatures. So some of your beasts are going to kill some mana dorks and some utility, you know, 0/3s that are chilling around. Some of your beasts are obviously going to die. But the thing is that you're going to kill everything smaller than 4/4, than 3 toughness, really. You're going to kill everything 4 toughness and smaller. And you might be left over with some residual 4/4 beasts on the battlefield. Big fan of that card in this deck. Omnath, Locus of Rage. 2 green, 2 red, 3 other for a 5/5. Whenever a land enters the battlefield, you're creating a token. This one happens to be 5/5, but I didn't even want to highlight that with what I'm saying, because all I'm trying to do is build in a lot of residual token makers so that everything I do has all these triggers and all these tokens are getting created from all these different angles that the opponents are trying to keep up with. And then you also have the residual effect whenever it or another elemental you control, your commander, dies. Omnath deals 3 damage to target creature or player. So, pretty excellent. Bramble Sovereign is a 4-cost 4/4. Whenever another non-token creature enters the battlefield, you can pay 2 and make a token that's a copy of that creature. Now, you can do this for yourself. You can target your opponents with this if you wanted to, because it does say whenever a creature enters, that creature's controller creates a token if you pay the 2. But for the most part, this just makes all of our creatures in our deck double for just 2 mana. I mean, imagine playing Avenger of Zendikar, having the 7 mana for that, having 8, 9, 2 more mana on top to get a second Avenger of Zendikar. Suddenly things are getting wild, out of control with all of your 0/1 plant tokens. Primal Vigor is this Overrun ability encapsulated. We're starting to move in that direction now. 1 green, 4 other. If 1 or more tokens would be put onto the battlefield, twice that many of those tokens are put onto the battlefield, booyah. And if 1 or more +1/+1 counters would be placed on a creature, twice that many +1/+1 counters are placed on that creature instead. You see what we're going for here. Now we're suddenly doubling all the tokens we're making. It's a lot like the card Doubling Season. Ever heard of it? We have. We've heard of it. It's very expensive. But Primal Vigor is going to give us that ability and give us the ability to double the +1/+1 counters that we're putting on any individual. What is this? Oh wait, doubling season. Did I mention that? Is this card just way too obvious for this deck? Yes, it's very obvious for this deck. If an effect would create a token, creates twice that many tokens. If an effect would put counters, it makes twice those many counters. I mean, this is making an 8/8 out of whatever landfall thing we're hitting with Phylath's ability. That's just bonkers. Doubling season, obvious choice, but whatever. Conjurer's Closet. I love this in this deck because our commander has an ETB. If we can, make it so that we have as many basic lands as possible in the deck. But, if we have Conjurer's Closet on the battlefield, doesn't really matter. If we've got 3, 4, 5 basic lands on the battlefield, we're going to be able to make 3, 4, or 5, 0/1 plant tokens at the beginning of each end step, because we'll just be able to flicker Phylath. We don't really want to attack with Phylath. 5/5 is fine, but it's, nothing super special. But if we are creating, a ton of plant tokens and we're putting a ton of counters onto this stuff every time we landfall, Conjurer's Closet could help us do that. So let's talk about Overrun strategy. Now that we've got a board full of tokens, doesn't matter if they are 0/1s or 5/5s, we're going to play things like Crater Hoof Behemoth. 3 green, 5 other for a 5/5 with haste. When it enters the battlefield, creatures you control gain trample and +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of creatures you control. Wow. This card resolves. You're probably going to win that turn if you've not been absolutely hamstringed at every single turn of your commander game. Crater Hoof Behemoth is a you win the game card, much like Finale of Devastation. 2 green, X. Search your library and graveyard for a creature card with converted mana cost X or less. I would recommend that you target at least 8 so you can go get Crater Hoof Behemoth. If you search your library this way, shuffle it. If X is 10 or more, creatures you control get +X/+X and gain haste until end of turn. So if you combine this with Crater Hoof Behemoth, your creatures are getting enormous, and your creatures are gaining trample, and everything is attacking. And this is just a hell of a way to win. I love winning this way. Early on in my commander life, I was big into, aggro strategies before I learned that you need a little help to get it done. But cards like Pathbreaker Ibex will get you there. 2 green, 4 other when it attacks. So this is every time. This is not just on an ETB. Creatures you control gain trample and get +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. So minimum 3. This is where some of your creatures with high power might matter. If Phylath has triggered twice and has hit the same plant twice, you've got an 8/9 plant. Pathbreaker Ibex swings, gives everything +8/+8. That's pretty good. And they gain trample. That's what you want. Trample and power. Now look, we can go trample and not power and go trample and infect. Triumph of the Hordes, 2 green, 2 other until end of turn, creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain trample and infect. So if you're not quite there, if you've got 4 extra mana after you cast your, Crater Hoof Behemoth or your Finale of Devastation for 12, if you've got 4 more, give them all infect as well. That's going to guarantee the win, because then you only need to do 10 points of damage to each opponent, and suddenly you've won the game with infect damage, with your plant tokens that Phylath created. And everybody was going, ha, what a humble, narrow general. And you went, ha, this humble, narrow general just whoop your waist. Overrun. 3 green, 2 other. Creatures you control get +3/+3 and gain trample until end of turn. This card is redundant at this point. I think you understand what I mean by Overrun strategy, but this is literally the card where the name of the strategy is derived. So I felt like I needed to include it and talk about it in the Phylath Overrun deck. There's some other ways that we can take advantage of this kind of thing. Cavalier Flame is sort of a repeatable version of this. That first ability is what we really care about. 1 red, 1 other. Creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain haste until end of turn. So for any, for all the mana you have, you can just dump a bunch of mana into Cavalier Flame and do a big swing if you want to go that way. Dragon Broodmother, here's another way to take advantage of all the tokens that we're going to have. 1 green, 3 red, 2 other for a 4/4 flyer. At the beginning of each upkeep, put a 1/1 red and green dragon creature token with flying and Devour 2 into play. And then Devour is an ability that says as this token comes into play, you can sacrifice any number of creatures. It comes into play with twice that many +1/+1 counters on it. That's what that Devour 2 is. So if you've gotten to a point where you've got a bunch of 0/1 plants and you don't know what to do with them, feed them to your dragons. That's a normal thing, right? Just feed plants to your dragons, and your dragons get huge. We can also feed our plants to Mycoloth. Mike is a 2 green, 3 other fungus for 4/4. It's got Devour 2, so the same thing. As it comes into play, sack any number of creatures. Myco gets twice that amount of +1/+1 counters on it. And then at the beginning of your upkeep, put a 1/1 green sapperling creature token onto the battlefield for each +1/+1 counter on Mycoloth. You can see how this is just like every bit of synergy that our deck wants and needs built onto one creature that definitely needs to go into this deck. And then you've got Throwmock, the meme satiable here. 1 green, 1 red, 3 other for a 0/0. Devour X, where X is the number of creatures devoured this way. So if you devour 10 creatures, it gets 10 +1/+1 counters on it for each devoured creature. So it sort of has compound interest on how many creatures you devour. You get 9 times 9, you know, it's a very cool creature. Throwmock is super dope. Only downside about Throwmock is that there's no trample word on that creature, so you got to figure out a way to give it trample to really make it a huge, viable attacker. But Throwmock is definitely a fun one to include in this deck. And then I wanted to go over one of my pet cards, which is Burn at the Stake. I play this in my Prosh deck, and it has a home in this deck, definitely. 3 red, 2 other for a sorcery. As an additional cost to cast it, tap any number of untapped creatures you control. So they can be 0/1 plants that are ready to call it a witch and burn it at the stake. But Burn at the Stake says deals damage to target creature or player equal to 3 times the number of creatures tapped this way. I've won games with this in Prosh. I know that this deck would allow you to win games with Burn at the Stake. Definitely check that card out as an inclusion in Phylath World Sculptor. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it. Like I said, this was a request commander, so I definitely wanted to get to it. It is a narrow commander, but it does have a lot of potential of powerful play. If you liked the video, hit that like button, that subscribe button. If you want to support us further, we have a Patreon. The link is down in the description below. Go check it out and see if you're a good fit. Other than that, I'm tapped out, and I'll catch you later.